Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here today with a tag video. This is the Don't You Forget About Me tag. It was created by Bookworm Adventure Girl, and I was tagged by Sandy at Miss Reads a Lot. So thank you, Sandy. This is a really fun one, and it's a nice quick tag video, although some of these prompts did send me down some rabbit holes. But lucky for you, I did all of that off camera. Lots of searching through my Goodreads and my blog and other resources. Okay, so this is all about remembering and forgetting. So prompt 1 is clean slates. Books you've read that you don't remember anything about. So this is where I had to go to my blog, my Goodreads, and I also I've got a list of all the books that my neighborhood book group has read. I joined them in 2007, and we've now read over 200 books. We hit 200 in January, so it's a very long list. So I went back to, after I joined, any books whose titles I didn't recognize, and I found a couple of there. The Sweet Hereafter by Russell Banks. Now, I found it on my Goodreads books read list. I did give it 3 stars. Now this one may not count because once I read the blurb, what it's about, I did remember it, vaguely. The plot sounded familiar anyway. It's about a school bus crash and the impact that has on the small town, maybe in Canada? I don't know. Anyway, that's about all I remember. So once I looked it up, I did remember it, but just seeing the title, I had no idea. Another book I read for book group, Who Has Seen the Wind by W.O. Mitchell. Now, Goodreads says I gave this 4 stars. When I read the blurb on Goodreads, it seemed vaguely familiar, but I really don't remember almost anything about it. Apparently, it is a Canadian classic set in the Prairie province, one of the Prairie provinces of Canada, Saskatchewan, I think. So I did vaguely remember that, the setting. Don't remember anything about the book, but I did give it 4 stars. So another one that came up on my book group list, and I thought, oh, I didn't read that one. Well, yes, I did. It was The Women Who Raised Me by Victoria Rowell. Now, I never finished it. I read about half of it or so. I described it in my Monday update on my blog as a mediocre memoir. And when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to make the book group meeting, I just stopped reading. So that one wasn't even on Goodreads. And finally, I found one that I gave 1 star to on Goodreads. So really don't remember much about this. The Doubt Factory by, oh, I should have practiced how to say this, Paolo Bacigalupi. Now, I have read his novels before. He writes YA, very often kind of eco-thrillers, and my family listened to one of his novels in the car on a road trip, and we all enjoyed it. So yeah, I got this one for review and thought, great, I'm going to enjoy this. Yeah, I only gave it 1 star. When I read my own review, none of it sounded familiar. I do not remember anything about it. Next prompt, Genie's Lamp, books you wish you could forget. So I have mentioned before here on my channel, I'm trying to keep this all things you haven't heard before, but I have to give a mention to that horrible novel translated from German, More by Gunther Geltinger. This was back when I was a professional reviewer. I was reviewing it for, I think, Publishers Weekly, and it was narrated by a pond. But I was hanging in there. It wasn't very good. And then I got to this part pretty early in the novel where the mother starts having sexual fantasies about her 13-year-old son. And I think my kids were about that age at that time. And I was just like, nope, I am out. I've mentioned it here before. I really do wish I could scrub it from my brain, but I don't seem to be able to. That is listed on Goodreads as it did not finish because I went to my editor and said, I can't read this. And I told him why, and he understood. Now, this next one is one that I don't think I've mentioned here before. I did talk before about my only eight did not finish books on Goodreads. This one, because I had read more than half of it, I did give it a review, or a rating at least. This was read for book group, The Death of Artemio Cruz by Carlos Fuentes. I think this is kind of semi-classic as well. It's set during the Mexican Revolution. It is a book in translation. I only got about halfway. Once we had our book group meeting, I was so relieved to just return it to the library and say, I don't need to finish this. And fully half, I did go and look at the review on my blog. Fully half of my book group didn't finish it. Now, here's the interesting part, and I had completely forgotten this. I do remember how difficult this book was for me to slog through, even just that half. And it was very hard to understand. And in book group, we discussed that maybe that was a translation issue. So at one point, one of my fellow book group members, one of my neighbors, said she saw that the cover of mine was different than hers. Mine was from the library. And she said, well, let me look at this page in your book to see, how different the translation is. So she opens her book to that page. I opened my book. I tried to open my book to that page. And she pointed out to me that my copy of the book was missing 23 pages in the middle. And this is how dense and difficult this book was. I didn't notice. And this may be part of why I was so confused. There was a character they kept referring to that I didn't know anything about. So yeah, that's how dense and difficult this book was. My copy was missing 23 pages and I didn't notice. So that tells you something. I do wish I could forget that experience. Now to the more pleasant side of this tag, Forgotten Gems, books you think need more love. So I picked out a couple here. Everyone knows author Justin Cronin for his best-selling blockbuster trilogy that begins with The Passage, sci-fi trilogy about these creatures that are created from a military experiment. However, I really loved, and I loved the Passage trilogy, but I also read this, The Summer Guest by Justin Cronin. Isn't that a beautiful cover? I bought this at an indie bookstore in Maine when we were visiting. It is set in Maine, in the North Woods part of Maine, which we have visited before. And it's a beautiful novel. No horror, no science fiction. This is just a beautiful novel about people and relationships. There's a lot of nature in it because of its setting. It goes through decades of this one family's life. I really enjoyed it, and no one else has heard of it. So definitely check that out. And for both this prompt and the next one, I also tried to pick things that I have great memories of from my kids. And one of those that I never hear about, but it is one of our all-time family favorites, Looking for Bobowitz by Daniel Pinkwater. Now, Pinkwater wrote loads of books. He's very funny. And this one is actually a follow-up to the Hoboken Chicken Emergency. But Looking for Bobowitz is first in our hearts. It is hilarious. As you can see, I've got the CDs. I got this at our library book sale. We took it on a road trip with us, one of our big, road trips out west with our camper. We laughed nonstop through this hysterical book. It's about a boy, like 11 or 12, in like maybe the 70s or 80s, who moves to Hoboken. And there is a giant chicken out on the loose. This book is such a favorite that our family has listened to it innumerable times. We have listened to it over and over, and every time it still makes us laugh. We quote lines from this book to each other still. My sons are now 29 and 26. My 26-year-old, who often declares he hates books and is not a reader, loves this book. At 26, he will still listen to this and bring it on car rides. It's a favorite. So give it some love. Check it out. I think you can still find it. It's especially good on audio. And finally, Forget-Me-Nots. Books you will always remember. Okay, I know I've talked about this one before, but as far as books I will always remember, this is at the top of the list. The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. I've said it before, and I'll probably say it again. One of my all-time favorite books. I've read it twice, and both times it made me laugh out loud and bawl my eyes out, even when I knew what was coming. My husband's read it too. We both loved it, but it is, this one. So for this category, books you will always remember, I was mostly thinking about the way books made me feel. And the ones that I remember are the ones that made me feel the most. So definitely The Time Traveler's Wife is at the top of that list, as it is on any of my lists. Another one is the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. Kingsolver is one of my favorite authors. This is one of her earlier novels. This book, the first time I read it, I was sick, homesick in bed. It was January. This is the other thing about books that stick with you. You remember where and when you read them. I think it was just a really bad relapse of my chronic illness. I was in bed for a couple of weeks. This book was my companion. I just remember how this book helped me escape to Africa and this family of missionaries. I remember how funny it is. Each of the family members has their own chapters. They take turns narrating. The youngest daughter, her chapters are especially hilarious. Just a book that was funny and moving and completely transporting. And as I said, I tried to include something from my kids' childhood. We listened to a lot of audios in the car together on our road trips, but also my husband and I read to our sons before bed every single night until they were in their teens. Seriously. Obviously, they could read on their own by now, but our family just loved sharing books that way. And as much as my younger son says he hates to read, he also has great memories of those times. One of the series that completely captured my family during those bedtime read-alouds was Gregor the Overlander by Suzanne Collins. Now, everyone today knows Suzanne Collins from her YA trilogy, The Hunger Games. This was before that. I believe I used to write reviews for Family Fun magazine, which was a blast for me and for my kids. We got free stuff sent to the house all the time for reviews, not just books, but toys and games, movies, music. It was a pretty cool job. And so I think this was probably a review book, but all of us were completely hooked on it right from this first book. It's about an 11-year-old boy named Gregor who lives in New York City, and I don't remember how it happens, but he finds himself down in the sewers and discovers a whole world down there of giant rats. I know that sounds gross. It's not. The rats are great characters. Other giant rodents and insects. Again, I know it sounds gross. It's a fabulous, fabulous series. If you like fantasy, if you've got middle grade aged kids, read the first book. I guarantee you will end up reading the entire series, as we did. Book 2, Book 3. There we didn't even wait until it came out in paperback. Had to get the hardcover. Book 4, I was lucky enough to get as an advanced reader copy. We loved the whole series. So when The Hunger Games came out, we were like, oh, we like this author. So we were early takers on The Hunger Games. Okay, and that's it. Just tag some cool people who love books. So I tagged a few people who I haven't heard from lately. Now that may be my fault. I may not be keeping up with their videos as much as I'd like to, but I tagged them because I would love to hear their answers to these questions. And that is Bethanne Bruninga-Socolar. Bethanne and I have been Booktube buddies since I first joined Booktube, but I would love to hear what she has to say about these. Michelle Lynn Reads, and Book Chat with Pat. I only recently discovered Book Chat with Pat. I enjoyed her videos. They weren't popping up in my feed much, so I was like, who was that? Where was that channel that I really liked? So I went back and found it. So Pat, I'd love to hear your answers, and Michelle, yours too. And please check out these channels. And this is a nice short tag. It doesn't take that long to do. And so if it sounds good to you, consider yourself tagged. And please let me know in the comments down below about books you would like to forget or books that you will always remember.